spend their entire millions and millions of dollars telling verifiable lies about the policies and laws of the state of Florida. Why wouldn't they be talking about all the different things that are going to happen if this were to be in this Constitution? The reason why they don't do that is because they know people wouldn't like it if they find out. I know people are finding out about it and are behaving appropriately in response to it. This is a very intentionally deceptive and vague amendment that's written to basically deceive as many voters as possible so that they can somehow get this thing across the finish line. You see the advertising is 100% going on the deceptive track to just try to tell lie after lie after lie. That doesn't work. People do not want to be lied to. They want to know the truth. They want to know the truth about, should this be something that is added to Florida's Constitution? And when you're dealing with constitutional amendments, your default should always be no. They should have to prove to you why this particular amendment in any circumstance is something that should be added to the Constitution. And remember, this isn't just like a policy. You know, we have policies in Florida. We have a fatherhood initiative. It helps promote fatherhood, helps fathers. I think it's a good thing, but if you don't like it, you can elect somebody else and they can try to change it. You can always alter normal policies and legislation. Once it's in the Constitution, that's forever. You really have pretty much zero chance of ever changing it. And so you better know, go into this eyes wide open. You got to know what exactly they're trying to do here to this state. And if they don't convince you that this is something that'll be good, you should vote no regardless, right at that point. Here we have a situation where this is something that is really a Pandora's box for bad policies. And it's written in look, the way this process works in Florida, these groups spend massive amounts of money to get on the ballot. They write the language, and they write the language in ways that are poll-tested to try to seem as innocuous as possible. This amendment doesn't define any of the terms that are actually in the amendment. That's not true for most amendments that have been added to Florida's Constitution. So you go into it, and what do these terms mean? Well, they have a specific idea of what those terms mean, and it's very, very extreme and would make Florida one of the most radical abortion jurisdictions, not just in the United States, but anywhere in the world, if this were to pass. What are some of the lowlights, I would say, not highlights of this? If Amendment 4 is adopted, it would eliminate Florida's parents' rights for parental consent for minors and abortion. Right now, Florida, just like anything, as a parent, they can't give your child, if you have a high school child, sophomore in high school, they can't give Tylenol without a parent's consent. This would overrule that for abortion and say that minors can have abortion without the consent of their parents, and they know that's bad. They know parents don't like that. So what they're doing in the amendment is substituting notification, but that is not consent. Notification be they send a postcard to the parent or do something, but the parent would be stripped of the substantive right to parent with respect to this one issue. And it would be the only thing that's taken out under Florida law for parents' consent. And I don't think most people think that that's something that is reasonable at all. So don't be deceived by this bait and switch when they're talking about notification. That does overrule Florida's protections and parental consent statute. You also hear frequently, and look, different people have different views when it comes on right to life or not right to life. And there's people that just believe, and you would hear this a lot, like, look, they don't like abortion, they want it to be rare, but they don't support legal protections for the unborn because they say it should be something resolved between the mother and the doctor. And you hear that a lot, even in this, what they talk about with Amendment 4. The really crazy thing about this amendment is it eliminates the need to have doctors involved at all. And you got to read the fine print, you got to read very carefully, but any time in Florida you have an abortion, it must be done under the supervision of a licensed physician. And we've never deviated from that, and I don't think any other state has really deviated, certainly not very many, if any. So this is a real radical change to say you don't have to be a licensed physician. What they say is you need to be simply a healthcare provider. Well, what is that? They don't tell you what that is, but I can tell you if this were to pass, you would have clinics open up without physicians involved. If people tried to regulate it, they would sue and say, hey, I'm a healthcare provider. That's what the Constitution says. I have a right to do this. And you know what? They'd probably win in court. So taking physicians out and putting in substituting healthcare providers, there's a lot of different people that qualify as healthcare providers that are far from being a licensed physician. So this really demotes physicians from the role they have in Florida law in a way that will be very, very dangerous for Floridians and from other states, because they would, I think their intent would be to recruit people to come from other states, from Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, to come to Florida for this purpose and see non-physicians be green lighting an abortion up until birth. This amendment would allow them to do that based on whatever judgment they have, which is obviously less than a medical doctor's judgment. Very, very dangerous. What about your tax dollars? Now, this amendment will lead to lawsuits by the people that are proposing it, where they're going to go into court and they're going to say that because of this language, taxpayers should be required to fund these abortions. And so it will open the door, and it will eventually lead to taxpayer funding abortions. Well, how do you get there? In Michigan, the same groups did the same type of an amendment, although I actually think Michigan was less extreme than the Florida one, but they cited similar language. As soon as it was passed, they then turn around and they're now currently suing, trying to get the courts to say that taxpayers are required to fund. How many people want their tax dollars to be funding these elective abortions, but particularly late-term abortions, which this amendment would mandate be permitted? I don't think very many want to do, but that is a foreseeable consequence of this amendment passing. They also really don't set any meaningful limits on when, and I think there's different people, again, that have different views that range the gamut with respect to right to life, but I think most people believe there needs to be some limit at some point. And we can have disagreements about that, discussions about when that limit is appropriate. But this says that there should be no protections at all for the unborn child until viability. But they don't define what viability means. And the way they would construe it would be as radical as possible. It would mean you could have 6 months into pregnancy for no reason whatsoever in terms of medical or health or anything involving the mother, that you could go in and have a purely elective abortion. Mind you, at that point, that puts the unborn child through excruciating pain because they're capable of feeling pain, and most of those abortions are basically dismemberment abortions where they actually have to pull the baby's pieces apart in order to abort it. And that would be constitutional. That be allowed to take place in the state of Florida. But here's the thing. Even though they're playing bait and switch on viability, and the way they would construe it is very extreme and I think beyond what most people think would ever be appropriate, it really is a fig leaf, because if you read how the amendment goes, it says that any health care provider can greenlight an abortion at any time for, quote, health reasons, but they don't define that. So in Florida, there's exceptions the life and physical health of the mother, but it's defined. This could be whatever some healthcare practitioner says, mental health, different types of things with that. And so that would mean there's no meaningful limits at that point, all the way up until 9 months. And people will sometimes say, oh, well, some people have asked me, does that ever happen? It does happen. Of course it's rarer that happens. But most late-term abortions in this country are, in fact, elective. And that's from, even liberal sources have acknowledged that fact. So states like Colorado, states like California, that is something that is permitted. That would be the case here in Florida, because the way this is written, it's basically an exception that swallows the rule. Now, patients' health. The amendment attempts to create, well, I mentioned kind of how they're doing with the baby on health. What they will do, though, because of the way it's written, there's a whole host of policies that, again, most people on whatever side of the abortion debate are believe are common sense. All of those will likely be invalidated. Licensing and sanitation requirements for abortion facilities, admitting privileges and proximity requirements for abortions to be performed near a hospital by an admitted physician, so immediate life-saving treatment can be performed if something goes wrong. It will likely invalidate medical screening requirements, waiting periods that ensure women have all the relevant information about their procedure. It will likely invalidate required in-person counseling prior to an abortion, as well as informed consent. Required all regulations surrounding abortion procedures and methods, because, for example, there's certain things like partial birth abortion, dismemberment abortion, all that would be wiped off the books, and would potentially impact the right of a child who survives an abortion to have life-saving treatment. You know, there's this dispute about Waltz in Minnesota, and the media is very dishonest about this because they're obviously on one side of this. What they have in Minnesota, they had a law that said if a baby survives a botched abortion, that there needs to be life-saving treatment. And Waltz repealed that, so if you have a child that survives an abortion attempt and they're born alive, that you have no obligation to provide any life-saving treatment. I just think that's horrific, but yet that very well may be what happens as a result about this amendment. And as I mentioned, the whole campaign are things that are basically just verifiable lies in terms of what they're doing and what they're saying Florida law is. And so let's just be clear about that. Under Florida law, abortions are permitted until a heartbeat is detected in the baby. Abortions are still allowed, though, in the cases of rape, incest, human trafficking, or when the child has a fatal fetal abnormality that will prevent him and her from surviving until after they were born. And abortions can be performed to protect the life and the health of the mother. That's just Florida law. Now, maybe you don't like that fact. Maybe you wish Florida law was different so that you could argue and run your commercials. But I think when people find out that, hey, that's what Florida law is, why are they telling me these lies? I do think it's a very risky strategy, because if you get people to believe the lies, fine. But if once they find out you're lying to them, then they tend to take anything you're saying with a grain of salt. And there is nothing ever in Florida law that would prevent a physician from providing appropriate medical treatment in these really, really significant circumstances. In fact, if you don't do that, if you don't provide that medical care as a physician, you are committing medical malpractice. So when you see some of these physicians say, oh, Florida law doesn't allow me, that is a lie. I think it's even more serious than that, because as a professional, you have a duty to understand what the laws and policies are that govern the profession. And if you're not capable of understanding that, and you're engaging in this passive-aggressive behavior to say, oh, I somehow couldn't provide a treatment, that is somebody that's not equipped to practice medicine effectively. And so if you do not provide, and not only is it not prohibited, it's required, and you can lose your medical license if you are not doing that. And another thing is, there is no legal liability, criminal or civil, for any mothers who undergo abortion. A lot of these mothers are in very vulnerable circumstances. They don't get a lot of support, certainly from the fathers, unfortunately, in this day and age. And so it's a very difficult circumstances, and there is not liability under Florida law for any of that. So if any physician is telling you anything different or any activist is telling you anything different, they are not telling you the truth. And the question is, why would you need to do that? Why would you need to deceive just to try to shoehorn this amendment in? Why don't you talk about all the things that are in that I just outlined and explain to people why you think it's appropriate to take away parental consent? Tell them why you think it's appropriate to displace the role of physicians and to displace them with simply a health care provider. Tell them why you don't believe that there should be any meaningful limits on when an abortion can be performed, and tell them why you think it'll be okay when these same groups pushing this amendment go into court if it passes and try to force taxpayers to have to fund all of this. Make those arguments and let people make decisions, but don't lie to the public. And so I'm glad that we have physicians here who are very clear-eyed about this and what it would mean for the state of Florida. You're going to hear from them in 1 second. Actually, we'll start right now. So it's my pleasure. We're going to hear from 6 different speakers, including the Lieutenant Governor at the end. But let's just be clear. Definitions in this amendment. You have no doctors required to be involved under this amendment, and you have really, really extreme policies such as the lack of meaningful limits. That is not something that belongs in any state's constitution, much less the state of Florida. So I thank these folks for coming up and being willing to speak the truth. Okay, so we're going to start with Dr. Cristina Pena.
Thank you for this opportunity to be here. My name is Dr. Cristina Pena, and I come to you today from the perspective of an obstetrician gynecologist born and raised in Miami and continue to serve this community in private practice. The concerns being claimed that women's lives are at risk if this amendment does not pass is a lie. In the 20 years that I have been practicing obstetrics and gynecology, I have never once been limited in providing proper medical care for my patients. Every time I walk into a room, into an exam room, I have 2 patients that I need to care for. I allow a preventable harm to come to either the mother or the unborn baby, I would be liable and sued for malpractice, because even under present law, the unborn baby is found to have value. As obstetricians, our entire career is to preserve the lives of 2 patients at a time. Advancements in medicine and standards of care that don't require an abortion have allowed for that. Note that most obstetricians do not perform abortions and run successful practices. That should speak volumes to you. Changing the existing laws with an amendment as this will in fact open women to risk. Here are just a few examples of this just from the first part of this amendment, which states that no existing law could delay an abortion. In Michigan, where a similar law passed, the health department was not allowed to perform a routine health inspection to make sure the abortion clinic was using safe and sanitary practices. Another example is in the case of an abortion being said to be needed for mental health concerns. Current law requires both the obstetrician and the psychiatrist to sign off on that chart. How many of you have not had to wait 1 to 2 days for a specialist to come around on you in a hospital? If this amendment passes, a delay in the psychiatrist coming to see the patient would legally allow the abortion to take place without the evaluation of the one person who can truly diagnose the mental disorder for which the abortion is said to be medically indicated. How is that optimal care for women? I have operated in 8 states across this country, from California to New York to the Virgin Islands, and I have yet to come across even a general surgeon who has hospital privileges to perform abortions. Why? because not even they are considered as trained and specialized as an obstetrician and gynecologist is to do so. This amendment removes the word physician from being the patient's healthcare provider. It scares me to the core to think who would then be allowed under this amendment to perform a surgical abortion and endanger the lives of women. Will it be a nurse practitioner who took a weekend course? That possibility would exist. It amazes me that those who push for the government to step in during the women's rights movement and make abortion legal so that it can be safe and not happen in the back alleys, as was their case, are now pushing to remove all the laws that were put in place for the safety of women. And if they are not the ones pushing this agenda, where is the women's rights movement to save women from the dangers of this amendment? The cases that I've been hearing in the media of patients who supposedly lost their lives because of not having access to abortion were due to the medical negligence of the doctors involved. Don't let them lie to you and tell you otherwise. In the situation where the life of the mother is at risk, her life comes first. It's the same concept as putting on your oxygen mask or your life jacket before trying to save the life of another. The mom's life comes first. If a patient has an ectopic pregnancy and her life is at risk, I'm going in surgically to save her. If her pregnancy is acting as a tumor which occurs in trophoblastic disease, I'm going in surgically to save her. If she has preterm rupture of membranes and is now at risk for sepsis and death, I'm going in to save her. I will tell you that even as a pro-life doctor who does not perform abortions, none of those situations are considered abortions even if those babies had heartbeats. The definition of an abortion is the intentional killing of an unborn baby. My intention in each of those situations was not to kill the baby, but to save the life of the mother. If the baby did not survive, that is considered an unfortunate secondary effect, an undesired but inevitable outcome. This is the true practice of medicine and preserving lives which our current laws already protect, and advancements in medicine and standards of care have allowed us to achieve. For those concerned that an abortion, in the true definition of the term, is not available, in cases of pregnancies that result from the horrendous crimes of rape, incest, and human trafficking, our current laws allow for abortion. Do not believe the lie. Women are not dying across our state due to lack of access to an abortion under our current laws, and they will certainly not be protected with this amendment. They are trying to save a business. We are trying to save lives. Thank you for your time.
Well done. Okay, so we have both Dr. Christie's now coming up together.
Hi, I'm the female Dr. Christie, and I've been practicing radiology in Miami for over 25 years. And one of the most enjoyable and important parts of my practice involves the ultrasound examination of pregnant moms and their babies. And it's a very special trust that these women have in me to help assure the best medical care for them and for their unborn children, who are also my patients, as Dr. Peña said. And this is a trust that I hold very sacred and one that is very much threatened by Amendment 4. I'm going to focus my brief remarks simply on the language of Amendment 4, which is intentionally vague and deceptive, and many of these things the governor covered, but I will cover that from the perspective of a physician who is intimately involved in the daily care of pregnant women. The first of the two sentences of the amendment says, "No law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health, as determined by the patient's healthcare provider." And let me just take a moment to go over some of those words. For example, when they say, "No law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion," they specifically mean that all or most of the current laws carefully designed to protect and safeguard the moms considering or undergoing an abortion will be discarded. The danger cannot be overstated. It means that the most basic common sense safety regulations, the licensing requirements, or even the cleanliness of abortion facilities can be repealed because those requirements delay and restrict abortion. The ultrasound that is currently required To determine the age of the baby before an abortion is performed is another delay and restriction that will be dropped under Amendment 4. This is extremely dangerous, and some of the examples we've seen, those terrible, sad tragedies that we've seen of women dying from chemical abortion, has to do with skipping the ultrasound. Even critical laws that require specific training and advanced qualifications of abortionists can be rescinded because these would delay and restrict abortion. Of course, as the governor mentioned, laws prohibiting the taxpayer funding of abortion will probably be rescinded under Amendment 4 because, again, they delay or restrict abortion. What about the language about viability? Well, there's no definition of viability in the amendment, and who is a healthcare provider and what constitutes the health of the mother? We have no idea what this means under Amendment 4 because the amendment intentionally omits all these definitions. So let me tell you the definitions you will hear the moment this amendment passes, if God forbid it does. Viability, which usually means the ability of a baby to survive outside the uterus when supported by state-of-the-art medical care, will suddenly mean any baby which needs any assistance, even minimal medical assistance after her birth. So a baby that might simply require a short course of supplemental oxygen may be at risk for abortion. Healthcare provider is defined in multiple places in Florida law, but very specifically not in the amendment. The term physician or doctor is intentionally omitted from the proposed amendment because they don't want these medical decisions in the hands of trained professionals. In many places in Florida law, healthcare providers include nurses' aide, ultrasound technologists, and even social workers. Do we really think critical medical decisions about a woman's health and abortion should be made by a medical aide? We don't think so. And what about the permitting of late-term abortions because of the health of the mother? Does health mean conditions that threaten the life of the mother? Or does it include abortions because the mother feels stressed or anxious, which is a normal fact of pregnancy? This intentionally vague and undefined term was chosen precisely to allow abortions at any time for virtually any reason. As you can now see, this amendment, as written, would permit non-physicians to authorize even dangerous late-term abortions for a woman simply because she feels stressed during her pregnancy. These are just a few examples of the very real dangers Amendment 4 poses to the woman of this state, and I only covered the first sentence of the amendment. As a woman, a mother of 5, and a physician, I ask you please vote no on Amendment 4. It's an amendment designed to radically increase abortions at the terrible price of women's and girls' health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning to everybody. I'm the taller of the Dr. Christies. Besides echoing the sentiments you've already heard, I'd like to make 3 additional points. First, I would like to directly address the deceptive and dishonest characterization of Amendment 4 by its advocates. And since I also happen to be a lawyer and I'm also a member of the Florida Board of Medicine, please let me set the record straight. This is a flyer I received in the mail this week at my house. It is sent by a well-financed group backing this amendment. Its main claim is simply a bald-faced lie. It tells Floridians that our current law has, and I'm going to quote here, I'll read it right from the flyer. It has no actual exceptions for rape, incest, or the health of the mother. The problem with this statement, as you've already heard, well, it's a complete and total lie. Because this, the relevant Florida statutes, is absolutely clear. It specifically and expressly permits abortion beyond the 6 weeks limit in the case of rape, incest, and the health of the mother. If you're still unsure, please go online. You can read this for yourself. It's there for everyone to see. Politics, sadly, can bring out the worst in people. There is never an excuse for flagrant dishonesty. The second point that I would like to make is that while many of our world's major religions speak powerfully and elegantly and persuasively about the dignity of all human life, Amendment 4 is not a religious issue. The physicians standing here beside me right now, they oppose Amendment 4 based on the science and the law and social justice concerns and morality and ethics and the visible evidence. And because we have all taken an oath to do no harm to our patients. We don't oppose this amendment simply because of our various religions. And by the way, we don't have this. People of all religions or no religion at all should stand proudly against Amendment 4. The last point I'd like to make does not come from my position as a physician or as a lawyer or as a member of the Florida Board of Medicine, but as a man who spent the first 35 years of his life as a secular pro-choice liberal. And having lived in both the pro-choice and the pro-life worlds, I know the emotions and I know the arguments that both sides absolutely feel right now. And many of my dearest friends and even family members don't agree on some of these issues. So I'm always looking for opportunities where pro-life and pro-choice people can find some common ground, some common consensus. And opposition to Amendment 4 is precisely this opportunity. This is not an us versus them. This isn't a religious versus non-religious. This isn't conservative versus liberals or Harris versus Trump issue at all. It's simply an issue of safety and common sense. We can all stand together and oppose an amendment that would permit unregulated abortion at any time during pregnancy, that would remove physicians from the decision-making process, and would even eliminate parental consent for our young girls. That's a radical and dangerous amendment, and one that has no place in a compassionate and moral society. Amendment 4 is simply bad for women. It's bad for Florida, and that's something we can all agree on. So please join me and vote no on 4 this November 5th. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Dr. Felipe Vizcarrondo, you're up.
My Archbishop Wentz, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Felipe Vizcarrondo. I am a pediatrician. I practiced pediatric cardiology for many years. I also have a degree in bioethics. I am a founding member of the Florida Physicians Against Amendment 4. More than medical professionals representing multiple specialties from nearly 100 cities across the state that spoke. Members of Florida Physicians Against Amendment 4 are concerned. They're actually alarmed by the extremism of Amendment 4. It's very extreme, and how it interferes with the practice of medicine. The present Florida law requires a person to have 2 in-person appointments at least 24 hours apart to obtain an abortion. This is the law. The first visit will include lab work, ultrasound, and a meeting with a physician. The second visit will include the abortion procedure. Ultrasound to determine the gestational age, the time of gestation of the baby, how many weeks pregnant. Meet with the doctor, what will he do? He will interview the patient, ask of familial, financial, and social issues. Some women are coerced into an abortion. The physician informs the patient of the procedure and the risks and consequences and obtains consent from the patient. This is what we call informed consent. It's part of the doctor-patient interview. Then the patient will return in 24 hours. This is the standard of care. If Amendment 4 passes, this process that I just outlined will be interpreted as a delay to the access to abortion and will be prohibited. I refer you to the first sentence of the 2-sentence Amendment 4. No law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion. This is the first sentence of Amendment 4. This is interference in the practice of medicine. Sadly, diminishes the doctor-patient relationship. Doctors will be forced to do substandard practice below the standard of care. Women will receive substandard care. Everyone suffers. It is bad for doctors, bad for women, and of course, bad for the babies. So I urge you all to vote no on Amendment 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Norman Ruiz Castaneda. Probably mangled that. Sorry.
Good morning. Buenos dias. My name is Norman Ruiz Castaneda. I am a pediatrician, certified. Been in practice come December, 43 years in the city of Miami, South Miami. So I have worked with lots of families, and I've worked with lots of children and their parents. And my experience with them is that most parents love their children passionately, and they want nothing but good things for them. They want their health, they want a good education, they will sacrifice, work hard to make that happen. Yet, as parents know, anytime they go to the doctor's office, they need to sign consent so the kid can be examined and get his vaccines. Every time the school needs to give a fever reducer, an aspirin, a Tylenol, they need to give consent. Anytime they go to the mall to get their ears pierced or a tattoo, the parents need to give consent. This Amendment 4 eliminates consent for an abortion. For an adolescent, a pre-adult, actually killing her child. And the reality is that most adolescents who are facing an unscheduled pregnancy, an unwanted pregnancy, are going to have their parents there to take care of her and love her and be with her. And by having this amendment eliminate their consent, they're making them vulnerable to people who would manipulate them or who would abuse them and be able to continue doing that. Pediatrician, 43 years almost, father of 5 women, grandpa to 3 little girls. Whenever our kids are in crisis, they need us. We need to be there. This is not about parental rights or authority. This is about parental responsibility. If we cannot be there for our kids and some other person substitutes a consent by a notice that this happened, how can we be there to take care of our kids? Please, if you care about families, if you care about women, if you care about girls, vote no on Amendment 4.
Okay, now we'll hear from our Lieutenant Governor, Jeanette Nunez. Where's she at? Okay.
Good morning, and thank you, Governor, for being here in Coral Gables to speak about this very important issue. And I want to thank the courageous doctors that are standing behind me for speaking truth and for being bold. We understand what's at stake, and what I will tell you, and I think everyone here knows, that this governor is never shy to take on a fight. In fact, I couldn't be more beside him for the past 5.5 years and taken on so many fights. But this one in particular, I will say, is one that we cannot lose and we will not lose. Because Floridians know that Governor DeSantis will never be deterred from standing for what's right. And I don't say that as Lieutenant Governor. I say that, most importantly, as a mother of 3 and a woman of faith. And I believe that those of us that prescribe to our faith have a special responsibility to stand up for what is right, to protect life. We are right next door to St. Teresa, one of the most iconic churches in Miami-Dade County. And just yesterday, thousands of people walked through that door and through the doors of churches all around our state to pray, to worship, to hear the word of God. And while I know that one of our doctors said this isn't a religious amendment, here's what I will say. We cannot go to church and pray like Christians and turn around and vote like atheists. And you have heard the governor explain all the reasons why this amendment is deceptive, it's extreme, it's radical, the lies that they're spewing. And we need every single one of you in this fight. We need to make sure that we protect our women, babies, the unborn, that we protect parental rights. This governor has fought tooth and nail to protect parental rights in the state of Florida for every aspect. And this is no different. So we need you to stand with us. We need you to fight with us. We need you to make sure that we vote no on this amendment. Early voting is today. It already started. We have to ensure that people understand the truth of this amendment, the lies that they're putting on TV, the lies that they're sending in those mailers. We cannot be silent. This is our time. We must fight. Now I'll say a few words in Spanish. Buenos días. Es un honor estar aquí con el gobernador DeSantis en Coral Gables y estar acompañado por muchos médicos aquí del estado de la Florida, compartiendo información sobre las posibles consecuencias de esta enmienda para nuestra Constitución del Estado. La enmienda 4, los activistas radicales que crearon esta enmienda están haciendo todo lo posible para engañarle al público y por eso estamos aquí, para aclarar estas mentiras y educar sobre las leyes actuales de la Florida. Actualmente en la Florida prohíbe los abortos en el momento en que se puede detectar el corazón de un bebé, lo cual ocurre a las 6 semanas. Pero sin embargo, existen excepciones para permitir los abortos hasta las 15 semanas en casos de violación, en caso de incesto, en caso de tráfico humano o si el bebé tiene una condición que prohibirá que pueda vivir después de nacer. Y siempre, quiero reiterar, siempre se permite para proteger la vida de la madre y la salud de la madre. La enmienda 4 se trata del aborto y está escrita en una manera para engañar, confundir y ocultar las verdades. Y específicamente le quita a los padres los derechos de consentimiento, lo cual para mí como madre, como persona de fe, es muy preocupante. Esta enmienda es extrema y peligrosa y estamos urgiéndole a todos los floridanos que hagan lo correcto, que no se dejen engañar sobre esta enmienda y que voten no en la enmienda número 4. Muchas gracias y que Dios los bendiga.
Okay, yeah.
And if I could now please call up the Most Reverend Thomas Wensky, the Archbishop of Miami, for a closing prayer.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Governor DeSantis, doctors, you have a very friendly audience here. But your presence here and your words today have reinvigorated all of us and have helped us to recommit ourselves for the 2 weeks that remain, that we can speak to our neighbors, to our family members, and speak of the importance of our communicating to them why this amendment should fail. So thank you for being here. And I would like to just close with a prayer. Vamos a rezar. God, our Creator, we give thanks to you, who alone have the power to impart the breath of life, as you formed each one of us in our mother's womb. Grant, we pray, that we whom you have made stewards of creation may remain faithful to this sacred trust and be constant in safeguarding the dignity of every human life. We pray also that you awaken in every heart of the citizens of this great state of Florida reverence for the work of your hands, and renew among your people a readiness to nurture and sustain your precious gift of human life. Amen.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.